Yes. Sats are over, Hayden. Year 6 teachers, we are ready for a wind down.
Oh my God. Winding down time. Term 6, baby. Let's go.
We can wind down all the way to those 7 transition days we have for all of the kids who are going to secondary schools.
Oh, and those reports we've got to do. Don't forget to proofread mine, by the way.
Oh, I've not done that yet, but I can definitely do that whilst I'm winding down and planning the sports day we've got to get done this
Oh,
term.
yeah. And on sports day, you can think about the lever ceremony we've got to do for the year 6s.
Yeah, you've done that, right? You've done that whilst you've been winding down, yeah?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's like totally ready to like be planned.
But just remember, we have got that writing moderation coming up, okay? So around then, whilst we're winding down, we can do that writing moderation.
That's a good point because we need that data to go along with our SATs results data and send that all out to the
It's
parents.
okay, because it's fine, because we'll see the parents. We'll see the parents on 4 separate nights when we're doing the production that we've been working on for the next 2 weeks.
Oh my God, classic. Like I'm so winding down right now. Oh, have you remembered that we've got to do all of those afternoon subjects that we missed when we were preparing for SATs? We've got to get them in as well.
That's fine. Don't worry about that, because when we're winding down
Yeah.
delivering those, we're also going to take all of our kids to the hall for a 3-hour photo shoot for their end of year photos.
Oh, that's nice. Well, at least we can plan the school trip whilst you're doing that.
I guess so, because we do have a residential coming up, don't we? All week of us winding down, looking
Yeah.
after 100 kids.
Finish up with that. We'll wind down.
Hayden, if that isn't winding down, all of that stuff, then I don't know what is.
I know, mate. Should we go to the pub?
Yeah, let's go to the pub. Oh, sorry, I can't. I've got to do literally everything I just said. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Teach, Sleep, Repeat. My name is Dylan.
And my name is Forehead Hayden.
Forehead Hayden.
Yeah.
It's crazy, Hayden. You can lean forward so much, and it still looks like you've got the same amount of forehead.
I genuinely, a child said that to me today, funnily enough. I get ripped a lot, don't I? It's really bad.
I was going to say, at what point in the year do you lose all respect? Your
Actually,
children lose all respect for you?
I will say it did start from another teacher saying it first, saying, oh, let's stare over there at Mr. We're doing production practice. Stare over there at Mr. Stevens' head. You can either look at his face or the shine.
Yeah.
So
Either. Both as interesting as each other.
Yeah.
I'm going to come in there on that point because I had a fleet of children come up to me in my classroom asking me, why is Mr. Stevens up in the hall? I was like, what? What are you on about? He's on the climbing frame. I was like, what? Oh, this image of you just scaling the climbing frame for some reason. Like, I don't know what was going on. Walked into the hall, 3 pictures of you, your display picture off WhatsApp, plastered across the climbing apparatus when hundreds of children trying to have their lunch. What on earth is that about?
I mean, long story short, the kids were all looking down. They were doing that classic thing where they're a bit nervous. They were looking down and saying their lines kind of towards the floor, and to try and encourage them to kind of look above the audience and look right back and cast their voices in that direction. One of the other teachers just went and printed some like mugshots of me and just stuck them all along the back wall so they could look at it. It made them laugh, and then it kind of worked. They did look at it.
So 2 things. Number 1, thanks for giving context to the viewers as to what on earth you're talking about. That was good. And second of all, wouldn't that put them off looking, having your face up?
Ooh, well, that's what you'd think, but actually, I'm the coolest teacher in school.
Good
so
banter. For anyone who did put 2 and 2 together, Hayden is in year 6 currently doing the production. So it's not the children. We don't make the children do lines as they're eating their lunch. Don't think that of us. But the year 6s are practicing for their production, which we will get into, as I'm sure you can see from the title of this episode. But Hayden, in general, how was your week?
Well, you'll be pleased to know I've got a story involving birds.
I know you have, and I couldn't believe it when I came to your house. Go on.
Yeah, so Dylan came around the other day and he started laughing way more than he should have because he realised that once again I've got another bird-related story, which is just a thing now. We need a jingle for this. And
wait, I got it.
Oh,
ready?
Go on. Yeah, go on.
Okay, you just got to imagine that it's just starting.
Yeah.
It's like a slow wisp. It's like a whisper in the wind. His name is Hayden, and he loves birds. If you come to listen to him, it comes the birds. And all the birds are here with Hayden. And this week, what will the story be? Is it about a bee? No, it's about a bird.
Yeah, I tried to do bird noises while you're doing that, and I could only think of 3, and one of them was an owl. So, can't think of birds. I used to do a really good seagull impression, which leads me to this story. At what point did this podcast go horribly
just
wrong?
Downhill? What was that?
I think when we started probably is when it started going downhill.
Why are you listening?
Yeah. Oh, you've done that thing again.
Anyway,
you look. So yeah, it's my mum's birthday. In fact, it technically is my mum's birthday today. If you're listening to this on Friday when we release the podcast, happy birthday, mum! Happy birthday. Not that you listen.
She doesn't listen.
Doesn't listen. Doesn't listen. My mum, she's honestly still trying to work out how to use her Nokia phone. She's definitely not listening to this podcast.
My mum listens.
Does
Just
she?
saying.
Oh, hello, Dylan's mum. I hope he gets
Oh, yeah.
you a glass duck and a glass seagull for your birthday as well, which is what my mum got.
No, Hayden. I've seen this. One of them was not a seagull, right?
It was a seagull.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah, it was.
A seagull.
The first one was a duck, which made me laugh because my mum went shopping with Lauren, and I said to Lauren, I was like, look, it's her birthday next week. If she wants something, she gets something. It's her birthday present because I never know what to get. And she did. It was perfect. And she wanted a glass duck and a glass seagull.
Okay, I've seen these. We're going to put it on the screen if you're watching the podcast right now.
There we go.
And we will post it on our socials for anyone who doesn't watch.
It's my noises
It is
again.
the most... it looks like it's been made by a 4-year-old. I was going to say that.
No. My mother would never have something like that in her
No.
house. It's very classy.
No, a 5-year-old. How dare you?
But yeah, also, when you were around my house, I know we also had a great tournament, didn't we, Dylan? Dylan likes to play a bit of table tennis around my house. Got a table tennis table. One of those guys. He likes to. Dylan's really sweet. He's really sweet because
Here we go.
He likes to make up little tournaments. So he goes, right, this is for Wimbledon. This is for Wimbledon, and we'll play first to 3 for Wimbledon, right? And then he'll lose. Because he loses all of them. He'll lose, and then he'll be like, okay, let's play the French Open now, and then we'll play to 3. We'll play 3 games again. We'll play that. And then he's like, right, I've got a charity cup, 1 game in the middle. This is what he does. Very competitive, very, very competitive man. Has to make it a proper competition.
That comes from my youth. We used to, me and my sisters, they're all younger than me, right? I've got 3 younger sisters. And so I was just like, cool. I could either accept the fact that they're not into their sports as much. They all did dancing and stuff. Or I could force them to play my competitions that I made up in the garden. I went for the route of forcing them to play my competitions that I made up in the garden.
Yep.
And I remember I would set up obstacle courses and stuff. Everything was to win. Nothing was ever to lose. And also that kind of carried on like through my group of friends at school. We used to go and play mini golf in the summer. And we'd play weekly. And it would be, this is the Australian Open. It's the Australian Open. This is the US Open. Yeah. This is the Masters now. This is the Masters.
Yeah.
We go through all the golf and the tennis. Like there'd be 16 cups so that I could eventually win. Like, oh yeah. We stop when it gets to 8-7. 8-7 is where we stop. Yeah, that's definitely the end of it.
I could have literally imagined you being exactly like that based on what you're like now. But speaking of sport, what have you been up to this week? You've been footballing, haven't you, today or something?
Yeah, it made me think because, Hayden, you'll be pleased to know, and so will the listeners, there's one more social media app you can find us on now.
Oh.
Threads. Anyone who's got Threads. And even better news, because Threads is directly linked to Instagram, it's got the same handle.
Ah, that's a shame. You've ruined our little... Yeah, I like ribbing you for making a new handle for every single social media platform.
No. So on Threads, if anyone's on Threads, you can find us on Threads at Teach, Sleep, Repeat podcast because it's the same as Instagram. And it just got me thinking because we play football every Tuesday. And that's a routine. We play 5-a-side football. And I just thought to myself, if I didn't have that routine in the midweek of every Tuesday, no matter what, I know I've got football. It's almost like work. I've got to go to work in the morning, whether I like to or not. I've got football on Tuesdays. It's something that happens. Without that routine, I think I would just slip into this kind of work mode from the start of the week to the end of the week. And I think I asked on Threads, teachers, what do you do in the evenings? Like, is it just work, and then you can switch off at the end of the week and have the weekend? Or do you try and force yourself to do stuff? And I don't know about you, Hayden. How do you find yourself in the week? Because I don't think this is even a teaching thing. I think anyone working a full-time job will find themselves just absolutely knackered on the evening and kind of just wishing away their week for the weekend when they can finally do something.
Yeah, a lot of the time. I mean, because obviously I live with my partner's a teacher as well, as is yours. I think we definitely fall into that rut easily of just like, completely exhausted, completely knackered. Cooking dinner is the ultimate chore most of the time. I quite like cooking, but I absolutely hate cooking in the week, like in a work week.
Sorry.
I like cooking, but I hate cooking at all times.
Yeah. The weekend, I just want to do something else. So I hate cooking then as well, but I love cooking.
It's so true. I quite often don't cook at the weekend. So I just hate cooking, apparently. I think I like cooking, but clearly I don't. But no, yeah,
just you like the idea of cooking.
Yeah, I like the idea. I'll get the odd time where you enjoy it, but most of the time it's just a chore, and then you're just knackered. I know right now the washing up's downstairs. I didn't do it. I left it on the side. That's tomorrow evening B's job. But yeah, I think I definitely fall into that stereotype of doing sweet nothing.
Well, I asked it on Threads, and in general, a lot of it was kind of reading, those low stakes things that you can just do in bed. But one person summed it up for me, and it was just like, I work late and I just need an hour in the evening just to sit and do nothing, just to sit down and decompress and just get ready for the next day. And there's nothing wrong with that. I just think that it's so easy just to fall into that rut. And then if you happen to have a busy weekend, full of stuff you just have to do, like appointments or whatever it is, you can go like 2 weeks of not really having downtime or like you time. And I just find that, sport in particular for me is that big driver of forcing me to go out, not only to exercise, but to socialize. And not only those two things, but whilst I'm playing football, I'm not thinking about anything. It's almost like mindfulness for me. Mindfulness for other people might be coloring or sitting around. I'm just thinking about football. Like it could, the whole world could just disappear for an hour. So, I don't know. It just made me think. Very grateful.
I've played football with you a few times, and you do you get into it big time. Like you seriously get into the game, which I think is really cool. I think it's important that you have that time, and you stink terribly afterwards as well. Which I learned today. You smell really, really, really bad after playing football. I got in Dylan's car today because on his way back from football, I said, "Come on, let's."
But you didn't play.
I didn't play today. No, I haven't played in years. But I said, "Come on, let's go to Tesco," because I like any 6-year-old, I wanted some magic stars for the evening. Get some magic stars, and I was like, "We can talk about the podcast as well. Let's just go and have a little drive." And got in the car. Just the worst smell I've ever smelled, honestly. And I teach year 6. Which reminds me, I've been teaching RSE this week, which is relationships and sex education, which we do through most of Key Stage 2, and it gets more extreme as you go up the years. And we were talking about puberty and how you tend to smell worse as you get older, and you would have been the perfect example. I should have brought you in. Damn. Next year.
Listen. Just because with your little video game pals on Destiny going to Mars to defeat the White Witch, the Wicked Witch of the dark side of Mars, and get your XP up to level 427. Just because that doesn't induce a sweat on.
I mean,
don't
it does.
Come to me.
It does. It depends how tricky the content is that we're playing,
Oh, I've been grinding for 6 hours. Oh, I'm sweating so much. Bring me some magic stars, love. I need some food.
It's like, it just reminds me of, just the classic South Park clip, that episode where they're all playing games and just exactly that, just sweating, playing games for like 20 hours. Solid, yeah.
I've got one last question before we move on and we get into the bulk of it.
Yep.
Can you tell the viewers how many hours of RuneScape have you played in your life?
Oh, God. Back in my childhood and early adulthood, really, or mainly childhood. I think people would be shocked.
That's maybe what I'm asking. How many days?
I don't know if I want to say. What game time? This is
game
this
time.
is
How
pathetic.
much time have you played?
This is pathetic.
Playing the game. Go on.
Well, it's 10.
He doesn't want to do it.
No, I don't. It was over a year. It was over a year. My game time. This is more than a decade ago as well. So this is like even more concentrated into a much shorter period of life. This is not like a game I've played forever.
So, this is what you get for calling me smelly, by the way.
Yeah, look at you getting spiteful. Yeah, you're a nerd.
You were 20 years old, right? You'd spent 1 year playing this game, right?
Yeah, a whole year game time.
But you got to remember, 7 years of that was spent sleeping.
Yeah, I was going to say, in a year of real life, I haven't spent a year playing real life.
You spent 7 years sleeping, probably another 6 years at school.
Yeah, and the rest of it.
1 year playing RuneScape.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, that'll teach you.
I tell you what, teachers out there, write into us because I want to know: is it just me? Am I the only person that still plays games, or am I a sadder with my magic stars and playing games? What do you guys do in your spare time? I know Dylan's already said this, but I'm going to pretend it's my idea now. What do you do in your spare time? Write in, let us know, and if it's something funny or embarrassing, we'll pick on you and we'll put it on the podcast. Because that's what we do.
If it's something not remotely interesting or funny, we'll ignore you.
Yeah, for being a normie.
Right, guys, let's move on to the bulk. End of term, end of year. Let's go.
Welcome back from the jingle. In that time, Dylan wiped his head with a towel because apparently sitting there is making him sweat. Good old summer evenings.
Viewers, there it is. Bloody hot in here.
Wiping himself down. Anyway, welcome back. That's all I've got to say. Dylan, take back over, please.
Fantastic. Thank you. That's why I'm the lead anchor. Anyway, we referenced it in our skit, didn't we, Hayden? It's that idea of it's the end of the year and lots of mixed emotions. We're going to go through all of the different parts at the end of the year and discuss them in detail. But the number one thing I see online, and to be honest with you, actually, funnily enough, I see more people explaining why it's not true than I do people actually thinking it is true. But it's still the meme, which is that in primary school, last term, you've done the SATs in term 5, term 6. It's the easy road, right? We're just winding down. Right, Hayden? How you feeling? Year 6 teacher?
We're just winding down. Yeah, it's fine. We're just winding down. We haven't got like 19 things to do. We're just winding down.
No,
it's good.
Not got 19 things to do.
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, Hayden, what's your opinion on summer 2? Because mine is that it's as busy, is not busier than anything.
It's definitely as busy, and I think it's actually probably because quite often the timetable gets changed up. And there'll be a lot of other things that just come into play that aren't necessarily, they might not even be things where you have to put loads of planning in and there's loads of marking at the end, but they're just different and they just take a different mind space to keep on top of and organize. Not that I do much of that organization because I work with a fantastic team who do it for me. I have a very good head of year, but for that person in particular, it can be really, really stressful making sure all these different things happen.
Yeah, and there is a balancing act, especially for those head of year 6. I mean, it's just different in year 6. No matter what people say, summer 2 is different for everyone, but especially year 6 because transition's such a bigger thing, in my opinion, and it has such a bigger impact on the curriculum. So, in general, Hayden, just for all the listeners who aren't necessarily working in schools, what do we see in summer 2 that we don't necessarily see in the other terms?
Well, there's, I can talk about it in 2 layers really, because obviously there is year 6, and year 6 will have things like a graduation quite often, or some sort of leavers celebration that's just different to other year groups. And that's usually not just like a really simple little thing. There's often quite a few like layers of what needs to go into that. They'll make like end of year hoodies. They've got to organize a shirt signing day. We're going to, if you're a church school, you quite often go to a church and do a little sing song there or some sort of ceremony. And then there's the year 6 production, some sort of performance, and oh, it's mad. And obviously transition day, they go to another school and they come back, and then you've got to the whole like behavior management, I find, is so different in term 6. Because the kids come back and they're ready to go, and I don't blame them. They want to go to secondary school now. The expectations feel different to them, and they're just a few things. Then you've got obviously like sports day. What else? I can't even think of some now. You probably got some on your mind, but there's just all these little things that come into play.
Well, like from our point of view, it's just little things like there always seems to be something popping up, coming up to say, oh, we got this, by the way. Case in point this week, and it's absolutely lovely, and I'm not against it at all, but we're going to watch the year 6 performance before the year 6s do that with their parents in the evening. It's like a run through with the whole school. Yeah. One of my favourite parts of the year, because I often know the children in year 6, having taught them previously, and this idea of, oh, it's amazing seeing them on stage and doing what they do. But, that does have an impact on the children's routine. And I think the biggest thing that I noticed in summer 2, this last term, is those routines are stretched to the max. And I know as teachers, we really focus on trying to keep those incredibly high standards, keeping behavior exactly where it should be. But children thrive off routine. And as soon as that routine is busted, it is an uphill struggle trying to keep those children on side. And I'm sure every teacher in the country right now is thinking, my goodness, behavior. No matter how good your kids are, no matter how amazing they are, my kids are lovely. I'm very lucky with my class. They are really lovely children. But, and no one will mind me saying, their behavior is dipping right now. Of course it is. It's hot. It's stuffy. We've got a performance. We haven't got English as normal. We're going to do an afternoon lesson in the morning for whatever reason because we've got the summer fair coming up. All of these things just add up to, summer fair. All of these things just add up to children's routines going, and therefore behavior dips, and it's just inevitable. And what I want to say is, if teachers are thinking that, especially ECTs, I've seen a lot of posts lately about behavior saying, "Oh, guys, I'm really struggling. My class are lovely, but behavior lately has just gone to pot." It's so normal, and from your point of view, Hayden, of year 6, I imagine it's just exaggerated.
Yeah, big time. I'm just trying to think of more stuff while you were talking there. We even have things like the secondary schools come in. And it's not one secondary school. Kids are going to like 12 different secondary schools. So they quite often book a time to come in, and those kids have to go out and like meet this little team and stuff like that. And we arrange extra transition days for children that have those additional needs. And there's all these just so many things. And every week you think you've got the plan for the week. And it's like, oh no, this is happening as well now. And you're like, oh yeah, I didn't factor that in. I've still got to teach this history topic. On top of all this, I've still got to like teach the curriculum, which is obviously something you do. Which leads me to, I guess, a discussion point about term 6, which has caused a lot of debate, I guess, online and in the career, which is it acceptable in term 6 to traditionally wind down and maybe reduce the maths and English you teach, reduce the curriculum you teach in place of all these other things? What do you think?
I think the answer has to be yes. When these other things, it's a caveat, okay? Mm-hmm. When these other things are vital, and I know it's a bit of a cop out because well, what's vital then? That's just nonsense. I think as much as possible, we should keep the routines in place, and that is English, maths. I think we should continue teaching English and maths because there's always more English and maths to teach. Like just because we might think that we've taught the curriculum up until the Key Stage 2 SATs, there's always going to be things that we can teach these children to further their understanding of mathematical knowledge and English and reading and writing and tasks we can do that links into transition still, I think. But I really value those other things like the end of year performance. I think children can get so much from that. And I think it's very easy sometimes for people on both sides to say, oh, it should stay exactly the same because English and maths is the most important thing and we need to make sure it's still delivering the whole curriculum. And I get that. But I think the idea of there'll be children in every cohort, every year group, who will thrive in that environment of putting on a show. That will not thrive in the environment of academia necessarily in the classroom. And there'll also be children who make such progress with their confidence. And I'll always remember because I did drama in GCSE. Before that, not remotely confident. Now, can't stop talking. You won't get me off this podcast. Shush, I'm talking. Yeah, you won't get me off this one. I'm joking. But that was really big for me. And I think that in general, there's so much to get out of it. And I think really good transition, like we spoke with Emily last week, was amazing chat as a transition teacher. Really good transition can be really powerful and put them on the right step for the next few years. So, in answer to your question, I think, yes, these things are vitally important. I think that just as teachers, it's a juggling act and it always will be.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? Really, it's a juggling act. There is a line. There is a line at some point. I don't know where that line is, in which it probably is quite bad if you're not teaching any maths or English. In terms, there's a point where you can't justify it anymore. Is what I'm trying to say. But you can be like, yeah, but we're doing this and these are all great experiences. I'd be like, well, yeah, but we are. You do have to teach the national curriculum. You can't just not teach it at all in term 6. And I'm worried that the year 6 culture across. I've worked in a few schools and I've talked to a lot of teachers in other schools in year 6. And I do get the gist that the general culture of year 6 is, SATs is done now, who cares? No more maths and English. Bye. We'll just do other stuff. And I don't know if I like that. I do get that from experience, like you do tend to teach the national curriculum in just a slightly shorter time frame because for some reason we have the SATs more than a term before the end of year 6. And it's a stupid system really. But I don't know, I just feel uneasy about this precedent that it sets to the children that the only purpose of learning this stuff is so you can pass tests. And after that, it just doesn't matter anymore. Like you just mess around for a whole term, then bye, off you go to secondary school with this terrible now feeling, I guess, towards these subjects. I don't know, it just feels a bit weird.
If you break it down, there's two things I want to make a point to there, because if you break it down from if you don't do maths or English in term 6, now I don't think lots of schools actually do this. I think they do a little bit of maths or English. But imagine you don't do maths or English for term 6 because you think you've done the SATs. Those children won't have done maths or English for 14 weeks before they go to secondary school. 14 weeks. Now, we've had children before go on holiday for a week and a half, come back and we thought, gosh, they're a bit behind and really had to try and catch them up. 14 weeks of no maths or English, then going straight into secondary school and thinking, oh, okay. And the other thing that I wanted to say is I think there's really important now to kind of separate two things, because I completely agree with what you're saying. But what you're not saying is that those schools wind down. I think there's two different things here. Those schools stay as highly, working as hard as possible, but just on other stuff. You're not saying, oh yeah, this culture in year 6 is they just wind down and don't worry about maths or English. No, they're working just as hard,
yeah, it's true,
but on other things.
That is really true, to be fair. Genuinely true. Because the kids don't actually do nothing in those scenarios. They are still doing things. It's just that the focus is no longer the SATs. The focus, like you said, might be something else, like building confidence. I actually wrote down some pros and cons of specifically thinking about the production at this point, but it kind of just applies, I guess, to those typically like more creative kind of end of year 6, term 6 kind of activities. I want to share them with you. So I wrote down some pros as development of confidence, as you've already said, creativity and expression, because maths and English, when it gets really heavy, maths and English, I do feel like they're not the most creative, expressionate subjects. You do miss out on art and DT and all that kind of stuff. And I feel like with productions, you get way more opportunity to do that sort of stuff, and you get lots of kids that then thrive in those situations. And also teamwork. I have always found that the end of term in all of the year groups I've taught, for some reason, just teamwork comes into play way more. And I always think, oh, we should be doing this all year, like encouraging this really good teamwork. But it only seems to happen in term 6.
Say same teamwork again.
Teamwork.
And I was trying to get away with it in a little pause.
No, but in terms of the cons though, and I don't know, see if you agree. The time commitment with productions involved for whoever ends up planning the production is absolutely horrendous. Absolutely horrendous. There are a lot of schools nowadays that are just saying, no, we're just not doing a production. We're just not doing it anymore. I've heard of it. There's been loads online this year that have been like, nope, we're not doing a production this year. It costs the school quite a lot of money, usually, to buy in a script, unless you're lucky enough to have someone write it, which is quite uncommon because that's a big old job. And God, just the amount of time that has to go into it outside of school to get everything ready is just it's completely unreasonable. And I think it's so fair that people say, no, we're not doing one. And if anyone goes, oh, well, you should be doing it for the kids. Okay, you do it then, honestly, because it is nothing to do with my job. It's nothing to do with our job. It's completely out of paid hours. The whole job is already paid for. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's the way I feel about it. It's almost like a favor. It's like, this is completely extra. I don't think it should be an expectation.
I really worry about these types of things in this profession because I think we are at the crunch point now of no one wanting to do them. And they're so enriching. Like, I would be a bit gutted, honestly, as a parent, if I had a child in year 6 and the school turned around and said, we're not doing a production, because it's such an ingrained thing in our culture that when you finish year 6, you go and watch your child do a production. It's like a send off. It's just a thing that's done. The biggest problem I find is that you've got to remember the context of the current situation in terms of the strikes and the funding in school and the decade of squeeze. Okay. I think 15 years ago, 20 years ago, it was a very well paid job in terms of your lifestyle that you could have from being a teacher. And the idea of volunteering to do things would have been much more kind of appealing, I think, because you think, well, I'm very comfortable. Financially, absolutely fine. I feel like I'm paid really well for this job. I love the idea of giving to my kids. And, I'm willing to go the extra mile because we're the type of people as teachers who want to put on these things for the children because we like them and we want to see them develop. And I really worry, and I wonder what you think about this, that, I've seen things online about the Duke of Edinburgh Award and people asking, oh, do I get paid for this? Because it's a huge amount of time. It's a volunteered role. You do it the weekend, you go camping, and people are saying, do I get paid for this? Because those same people the week before had 2 days striking because they're fed up of not being paid enough. They lost 200 quid. And then they're thinking, wait, why am I going on this Duke of Edinburgh trip for the weekend for nothing? And I think that's what's being squeezed now, right away now. The attitude, and especially me, I used to be the first one to say I'll come to a football tournament at the weekend. I'll come to cross country at the weekend. And I just don't now. And you know what? I'd like to, but I just have that little twinkling of just resentment of just like, yeah, but I feel like I'm taken as a mug for what I get paid for this job anyway. So I'm sorry, guys. I'm going to go and do something else in that time. I'm going to go and tutor for an hour and actually make some more money. So, it's not a nice situation to be in. I wish it was different, but I completely get people who are saying, no, I'm going to put my foot down.
Sorry. No, I'm just putting my foot down. I'm just putting my foot down. Okay.
Why can't I get through an episode just saying words properly? My good friend James, I'm going to say it now because this is a really good time to say it. Had a barbecue at the weekend, and obviously you name dropped James. James is one of my very good friends. He listens to the podcast every week, and he was saying, I kind of wish you said the name of my company. So need financial planning if you want any mortgage advice.
I do need financial planning. What's the name of his company?
Need financial planning.
Yes.
I do. You do? Oh, that's the name of his company. Yes. So James was very pleased, and then my friend Liam, who was hosting the barbecue, was on the barbecue, and he was like, "Yeah, you've said about 3 of my stories or anecdotes without mentioning me once." And I was like, "Liam, I'm going to tell this story on the podcast. There you go, mate. I've done it. There you go, Liam. Thanks for listening, pal. And next time, don't be such a sore loser. If you provide Hayden with a mortgage, then maybe you'll get another name drop. But until then,
wow." Well, it's a shame we're going to cut that whole segment because it was so boring. But we're going to move on now. They'll have to get a mention another time. I think we're done hearing our rants about the production. Should we talk about something else?
Yeah, I was thinking of talking about the production a bit more.
Okay, so I've got a few more cons, and I actually have. So unequal opportunities for all is another con.
Oh, that's
of
a
mine.
good point. That's a point.
And especially in larger schools, because really, if you're at like a 3-form or 4-form entry school, that means you have 3 or 4 classes in the year group. Is there really a show out there where like 100 children can have a meaningful role? Probably not. The most I've ever seen is like 30 kids that have like a main role, and after that, it's just you can't make a story, a show with that many main characters. So what happens is tons of kids spend 5 weeks when you're like preparing for this show, basically sat on a bench, occasionally joining in with a song or doing like a choral thing. And it's horrendously boring for them. So that's a massive con that really puts me off of doing shows like that, productions. And like I said, not everyone enjoys that. And my last point, we've kind of talked about it, was what happens to the other subjects. But I think we've sort of covered that in our term 6 discussion anyway, really. But it's still a valid point.
Another staple of end of year is transition day. And we did talk about that last week with Emily. And we had it this week. We met our new classes for next year. It's always so exciting. And, every single year, that excitement doesn't go for me. And I really do look forward to meeting the kids for the first time, because when they're sat in the classroom, beaming, they're always smiling, they're always excited. There might be a few tears, but you can get over that very quickly. I absolutely love transition day. I love meeting my new class. I love getting to know them. How did you find it, Hayden? Because obviously you're still in 6, so you had a lot of children who I've taught previously.
Yeah, exactly the same. I don't know what it is about transition. A lot of teachers get really nervous, and I definitely have had those nerves in the past years, but they've kind of gone now. But I absolutely love transition day for the exact same reason as you said. I mean, we've got a bit of an advantage, I will say, because being one of 2 male primary school teachers in the school, it just is an advantage. For some reason, it's like the scarcity, is that the right word? Yeah, it's like the scarcity of you're one of 2, so I want that one because there's not many of them. And they just immediately are like, oh, I've got that teacher. It's Mr. Stevens or it's Mr. Price, which is always a really nice feeling in a selfish way. But they're on their best behavior. So you get to see them in their absolute best light. They couldn't be more happy and excited and intrigued and curious about being in there. I love meeting the kids. However, I will say, not the best start this year. My kids have already completely and utterly rinsed me. Already. My next class.
There is such a theme here. Are you just like, you must be so lovely and approachable that they just think they can absolutely rinse you?
Yeah, but not in like the classic. When they really get to know me, maybe I'll make a bald joke, and then they're like, "Oh, okay, we can make bald jokes because he made a bald joke. Like that's acceptable." It was nothing like that, because I would, at this point of the year, I'd actually say to them, that's rude. Like, you don't do that, because we haven't made a bond yet. You haven't got mutual respect. Like, you don't do that. That's not how you start a relationship with someone. However, my job share teacher, who was also in for transition day, put together just a really small get to know you quiz, just something fun to get them into the afternoon. And she did message me first and said, "Can I get them to guess our age?" And I was like, "Yeah, go for it, but I know what's going to happen here."
She knew what she was doing.
Oh, yeah. So just for context, Julie, who I think listens to the podcast as well. So hi, Julie, and thanks for doing this. It's very funny. Lovely Julie.
Do you know what, Julie? Can I say very quickly, Julie, the queen of the meme, I must say, the queen of the meme. If I get a message from Julie, it's going to be some kind of meme.
Wow, and she never messages you, so that's weird. So she put together this little quiz, and just for context, and she won't mind me saying, she's 38, I'm 30. So she put, the first question was, how old do you think she is? And it was on Kahoot, so there were 4 options on this quiz, and they were 27, 30, 38, and 44. And it was the same options for both of us. And they were very kind to her. And I mean, she does look very young anyway. Julie does not look 38. So the kids naturally went for 30, which was probably an appropriate guess for what she looks like. And it was like, okay, fair enough. Okay, or they're just being nice because, it's transition day. I was thinking, right, they're being nice. Comes to me, right? Same question, same options. I was standing to the side of the classroom at this point, kind of looking over the shoulders of a couple of boys. And I watched this one boy, and this is what he was doing. If you're not watching, then tough. He was going,
Hayden's hovering his finger over 2 options right now.
Yeah, hovering his finger over 2 options. I looked at them a bit more like, squinting, have a look. 44 and 38. I was like, he's wondering seriously. Oh, which one is it? And then confidently, yeah. 44. I was thinking, all right, yeah, cheers, mate. Yeah, we've got the funny one. Got the Joker in the classroom, have we? Looked at the screen, it shows the results. 50 to about 60% of them, 44. I was like, okay.
And they weren't even ripping you. They were like, Jamie, like,
yeah, I know. Some of them might have been trying to be a bit funny. That many of them, though, no. There's not 50% jokers in that classroom on the first day. That's ballsy. They just thought I was 44.
Oh man!
So I cried and I left.
Yeah, well, on that note, I guess, because I'm thinking about how I was on transition day, because I assume you obviously didn't take that to heart. You weren't then mean to the children.
No, of course not. To me. I don't care.
And it made me think about when I was in the classroom with the children, because it was the first 15, 20 minutes of them being in the room. And I don't know about you, but on transition day, there's a lot of different things that you can kind of do as a teacher, and there's always a lot of teachers asking online, well, what's a good thing to do in transition day? What's seen as a sensible thing to do with your children? And for right or for wrong, and I'll be interested what your opinion is, Hayden, I make it my aim to make sure those children can go home, and when their parents say, oh, you met your new teacher, how was it today? I want the first thing they say to their mum or dad or whoever it is asking them to be, oh my gosh, it was the best. We did this, like overwhelmingly positive.
Yeah.
And as a result, I think perhaps maybe sometimes, I don't know, but this is just the way I am, and that's what I think works for me. I am overly silly, overly, ridiculous, and just constantly trying to make them laugh, trying to be a bit funny, but also, setting those routines and those standards. And I think you can do both. And I wonder what your opinion is, Hayden, because there's a lot of chat in the teaching world about where's that line? Where do you go?
Well, there's an old saying, isn't there, Dylan? And I know you would have heard it. And most teachers out there will. If you want not a teacher, you might even have heard this phrase anyway, which is, don't smile until Christmas. That's a very old piece of advice. It was actually some advice I was genuinely given really near the start of my career. Don't smile until Christmas. And breaking that down, all it suggests is you don't do what Dylan has done there. You go in very hard with your expectations, very stern. You don't show your nice side yet. You don't make them laugh because you set this precedent, which is going to work in terms of they're going to be a bit more, a bit careful about how they behave in your classroom. They have very high expectations of themselves, thinking, okay, this teacher's strict, like we've got to work hard this year. And the idea is that's going to be better for you in teaching them, which isn't strictly untrue. But I don't like it. And I think it comes back down to, I think we've had this conversation in the past of like this whole demanding respect versus earning respect kind of thing in my head. And I think that falls into the category of the whole mantra of like, I demand respect and this is how I do it. I don't really like it. I do think there is an element of it, which is true. Like, for example, earlier when I said I would be cross if someone made a bald joke to me in that new class. Versus someone in my current class, I wouldn't be cross at all, as long as it was in the right sort of time and place, and they need to understand that context. But I would be cross if it was a new one, because I'm like, you haven't developed a relationship with me yet, which means you're literally just taking the mick to try and get a rise or try and get a laugh out of other people. That's not nice. That's not how humans are supposed to interact. So I would be a little bit stricter in that scenario, but I certainly don't follow the advice of don't smile until Christmas. I don't think new teachers should be given that advice. I think it's poor advice. That is not going to allow you to develop a meaningful, real relationship with the kids. I think they'll see right through it and just think it's an act and not respect you for it.
Yeah, a lot of people as well who I speak to who aren't teachers necessarily, and I thought the same myself when they were saying this. When you think back to your teachers at school, I feel like I can really easily tell those who were genuine and lovely and nice and kind and enjoyed teaching, apart from the ones who I think were putting on a bit of an act, being honestly just a bit mean. And I felt like those teachers didn't want to be in the room almost, and almost like it was a chore for them to do their job. And I very clearly, remember just thinking, why are you in you don't like children. You don't seem to like me or any of us here. Yeah. What on earth are you doing? And clearly they were following that advice of just, be really strict. You're there to get results out of them, which is true. But I think for my style, that involves building really good bonds with the children, making them enjoy being in school, but also maintaining those really, really strong standards, those really high standards. And I don't think it's either or. I think you can have those really, really rigid barriers but still try and get on with your class and try and enjoy their company, because guess what? You're going to be spending hundreds of hours with them. Why do you want a dynamic where you're kind of controlling it in terms of, no, you're way below me where I am, and it's because I say that's true and you're going to do this right now. It just makes me feel uncomfortable. I don't know.
It's definitely something I've developed though, and it's taken me a long time, probably longer than the average teacher, I reckon, for me to develop that actual line. I think when I started my career for the first couple of years, I was way too friendly, and pally with the kids. And I remember being observed and someone's feet, and I got really uptight about it, as I always do. I'm a very defensive person. I hate it about myself, but I just am quite defensive. And some of their feedback, and it was in my NQT year, my first year of teaching, was, we like this and this and this. You shouldn't let that child spoke to you in this way. That child spoke to you in this way, and that was not good. And in my head, I was like, I remember exactly what the person said, and what this boy said, and he was just like making a joke. He shouted out. It was me teaching. I just kind of responded to it as a bit of banter, like you would, like a friend, like you interrupt me, I'd respond to it in that way. But the people watching it, the teachers watching it didn't like it. And I remember being like, well, you just don't have the right mantra. That's just difference of opinions. You just don't know what you're doing. I'm developing a nice relationship with that kid, and you clearly just don't do that. But looking back, they were absolutely 100% right. That kid crossed the line and ended up disturbing everyone's learning. But I took it, I valued way more, I don't want that kid not to like me. So I'm not going to tell them off. I'm just going to be like, well, yeah, and then like return the banter and then carry on and hope they don't shout out again, which obviously they did. Of course they did. And then all of the children start shouting out and generally being disrespectful. So there has to be a line, but it took me a long time to develop that line. But I like to think I didn't go too far and stop having any kind of fun, stop earning their respect by being nice and being silly and having jokes and stuff like that with them. I don't know about you. Did you feel like you had the same sort of journey of that? I don't know what it was like really for you.
Yeah, very much so. I think I'm not trying to dig you out at all, because you've said this a million times, but I think you definitely were someone who you really did like, the idea of being liked and being that teacher who's like, oh yeah, and so do I. Like, don't get me wrong, I love that. But I was very conscious of trying to keep those standards consistent. That's what I focused on, I think, for the first few years of my career. I was a bit inconsistent with those standards, and I kind of had them there, but like you, I'd kind of let it slip at times, and then it was really unfair of me when I then decided those standards came back in the next day, and I realized that was really weak practice from me, because I would accept it at points where I felt like in the mood to have a bit of a joke, but then I wouldn't accept it at other points where I thought, oh gosh, no, I really want to get this done, and that wasn't a consistent message for the children. And I think me trying to call them out for doing something which for the last 2 days I for some reason just thought was acceptable really kind of ruined that expectation dynamic of the behavior. Now, I think getting children to like you isn't the hardest thing in the world, is it? Realistically, you've just got to be a bit silly, talk about what they want to talk about, and they'll enjoy it. And there's a little bit in there of the children like you because I can shout out to Mr. Price, and that's not acceptable, like you said.
Yeah.
And if I had to give any kind of advice to teachers who are new, is to do not budge from the expectations that you set. Now, you can set what expectations you like. There's always usually a bare minimum. For us, it's do not talk when someone else is talking. Do not shout out. Do not get out of your seat. They're like what I can distill it down to. Don't just get up out of your seat for no reason. And I think being really, really, really strong and setting those on transition day is really important. But there's absolutely no reason why I, on transition day, for example, just walked around the room and I did like 5 minutes of just getting the children's names wrong on purpose. And it was absolutely the only reason was to make them laugh.
Yeah.
And, just getting the wrong letter at the front and then calling someone. I had for the first time, I had about 8 kids in my class where I've taught their older siblings, where I've been teaching for long enough now. So I spent the whole time calling them their sibling's name, and they loved it. And it was hilarious to them. And they're like, what? That's not my name. That's my sister's name. What are you doing? But it was funny. But if someone then shouted out, and they said, oh, my name's... I very quickly said, oh, no, we don't do that.
Yeah.
If I'm talking, you've got to listen.
Yeah.
And if I'm talking to you, you can talk. And if you've got something to say, you can stick your hand up. And if we have time, we'll talk about it. But you can't shout out, can you, Jenny? And I'd get their name wrong. And they'd laugh again. And it was fine.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Still just getting those expectations in line and not budging from them. But it doesn't mean you don't have to smile.
Yeah, I agree. I love that approach, by the way. It's something I try to do all the time. when you want to say something serious, and just reading the room as well. Like you got to know the kids. Like I've got boys in my class over the years, certainly, who just don't want to tuck their shirt in. Obviously, I was like that. Why would you want to tuck your shirt in? It's not comfortable. You don't care what it looks like. It's a uniform. Like, why would a kid ever care about that? Which I fully empathize with, right? But rather than just constantly being, tuck your shirt in, and being like strict, I always say, oh, whoa, nice dress. Are you going to tuck it in? Just something silly, if they got a long shirt on, because it's like, it looks like a dress. And then I'm like, hey, you got your big shirt on, you'll grow into it, whatever. And they're just like, it's funny, but the message still gets across. Like, oh, you're calling it a dress, but it's just a shirt. Yeah, okay. So tuck your shirt in now. And then it's dead serious, like you said. But if they didn't then do it, I'd then immediately flip back to, okay, you actually got to tuck it in though. Can you get that done before you sit down? But I like the just approach of trying to be a bit like, a little bit silly. This is in jest. I'm not constantly telling you off. We can be a bit silly as long as you actually follow the rules and be sensible.
And I think, like you said, Hayden, that's what took me a few years, and maybe for you as well, is being really consistent. And I just want to go back to that point again for anyone listening who's thinking, oh gosh, I want to be that teacher who's nice and and cares for their children, because I love these children, I love working with them, and I don't want to be seen as this wicked person who's just constantly moaning at them. I think it's not easy, and it will take time, and it will take a few years probably for you to absolutely get it right for you, but consistency is the number one thing I'd say. Is if you say something is expected in your classroom, it has to always be expected for everyone. And if you have any exceptions, then you can deal with that. You can deal with that child in whatever way, deal with each child individually. It doesn't have to be this draconian rule, but it has to be consistent and fair. And you have to, in my opinion, I've said this a lot of times in this podcast, I don't think children are beneath explanation.
No.
I think we can explain to them exactly why we expect that.
Yeah.
And I think that reasoning helps in the long run.
Funnily enough, that leads perfectly onto what I was just thinking as you were talking then, which is I've casually developed this really strong meta approach to teaching. I do it all the time now, where it's like I just stop for a second and I explain precisely what I'm thinking to them and why I'm doing something and what's going to happen if this happens, or whatever route we go down. And I just find it works a lot of the time. I just feel like, I'm actually going to stop for a second, because what's happening right now is this table keep talking over me, and if that keeps happening, my mood is going to go down, and all of this fun we're having is just going to stop. We're not going to do this anymore, because I'm not prepared to teach you and have a bit of a laugh with you if you don't have any respect for me at the front. So I can quite easily slip back into, let's just work silently and do this and do whatever. Or you can have a bit of respect, don't talk when I'm talking, and we can carry on having fun. And like you said, then I'll go straight back into a joke, because I've got my point across now, and then I'll say something silly again. But they understand it. And then if they were silly again, like you said, you have to stick to expectations. If they then completely ignore that advice and yeah, okay, whatever, and then carried on doing it, but no, I've told you once, I'm not saying it again. So we're going to stop now. So everyone stop, close your book, do whatever you're doing. You just go back into, and you have to stick to it, even if you're not really cross. I'm not really cross in that moment. I don't really care. But it's part of the act. And I'm trying to teach these children, I'm trying to teach them how to socialize, how to be in a room full of 30 people and have respect for the person that's speaking or the people around them. Like, we have to teach these kids these things. They don't just know them. Some kids will pick it up, but most people don't just know how to do that. You have to show them and teach them.
And when you say you don't care, I'm going to clarify it for you, because I know you do care. You do care that the children learn to do that. I assume you mean you don't personally take offense at this.
That's all I mean. Yeah.
I think I felt a lot of the time at school that there were just a few teachers who had just personal vendetta and really took it personally. And I just, that's up to them, fine, whatever. But I just think from my point of view, these are children who I'm trying to teach how to behave as well as what to learn. And that's part of the job. Would you get annoyed if a child really sat there and didn't know how to do short multiplication after you taught it to them? No, you wouldn't. You'd help them doing it. Yeah. So if a child is consistently still not following the class rules, I see it as the teacher's job to help them get to the point where they can follow the class rules properly. Deciding to get angry over that, I'm not saying I never get angry, because I'm a human being. It can get frustrating when it seems something as simple as don't shout out. But some children struggle with that. And I always have the mantra of trying to treat that as a learning opportunity, just like if they don't get fractions.
Something I always say to my new maths class, actually, every year, right at the start, because I'm very aware that just children have a lot of maths anxiety in this country, and I like to try and make them enjoy the subject. Something I'll always say to them, and I think it works, is I'll say, right, everyone stop. if like my rules for my classroom, if you are listening and taking part in this lesson and you don't understand something, I will never, ever, ever, ever get cross at you for asking for help or not having any clue of what you're doing and therefore not producing the same amount as everyone else if I feel like you've just given it a go and you've listened. If the exact same end scenario happens and it's because you've consistently been messing around in the lesson, you've been told 4 times to stop doing something, you haven't listened, I'm going to get really cross at you. That's it. There's the 2 scenarios. Like you both ended up with the same finished piece of work. This person, I'm going to go and sit down with. I'm going to be really nice to them. I'm going to help them. This person, you're going to come back at lunchtime. You're going to do it, and I'm going to make sure you're doing it. You're going to waste your time because you've been rude. And it's like, and I just like to distinguish that with the kids because sometimes they just need to understand that even though the outcome is the same, you know, as in like their work, my response might be different.
Yeah, they've both done 4 questions, they say.
Yeah, exactly that. Because you get that kid that goes, "What? You're not keeping them in? Why have they only done 3? I've literally done more work." Always get that kid, don't you?
That is such a good impression of that kid. We know that kid. Everyone knows that kid.
But they literally look at there. He's copied. He's done 3. And I'm thinking, like, he doesn't know. It's like, yeah, they copied because they're really struggling and they're really anxious now about getting it wrong because they actually just want to do the right thing. They've been listening really hard. And I'm not going to tell them off because I know that. But this kid sat here is like, oh, that's just not justice, is it? I've done more because they think the only important thing is the outcome in the book.
And I think that's like kind of, honestly, by the profession, we drill that into them a little bit because it's something I've changed in my career off my own back because I don't like it. And it's linked exactly to what you just said. A huge thing said to ECTs, and I can see why, and it does work to a degree, is you always set expectations when you start a task. So you'll start a task off and you say, right, I need everyone to get to at least question 5. And the reason that we're taught to say that is so that every child has something to work towards.
Yep.
But who are we kidding when we pretend that that's an acceptable thing to do in terms of differentiation and children's needs and children's ability to get that far? You know, exactly what you just said. One child might get to 5 and I'll let them go to lunch if I'm using that old rule. Another child gets to 4, but has worked so hard and you know, maybe it's just a bit slower because they're really taking their time. They're thinking what's the best use of the conjunction maybe in that sentence. And I've completely flipped how I do that now. And I say something really simple to the children, but I still say it every day when we start a task. I say to them, okay, guys, we're about to do the task now. And I'm watching all of you working. And if you work hard for the next 15 minutes, that's amazing. Thank you so much. If you work your hardest and try your hardest for the next 15 minutes, that's all I want from you. But if I remotely think that you're not working hard, you're being a distraction to your partner, or you're not putting your top effort in, then that's when I'm going to have a problem. And I'm going to have to talk to you and ask why it's happening. If you're stuck, put your hand up and I'll help you straight away. Or I'll get your partner to help you, or I'll sort it out. So I've just flipped that. I think it loses a bit for some children because some children do like question 5. But you know what? I go up to those 3 kids and I say, I think you can get to question 5 today.
Yeah, exactly.
Or I'll draw, I'll just draw a little line. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's when you're starting as an ECT. Cool, set that. 5 questions, awesome. But don't be afraid to move away from that once you learn your children and once you know what they're up to. And you can actually know, for this child here, I'm going to work with them and I'm going to say to them straight away, we don't have to get to question 5 today. We're going to do as much as we can. And that child's immediately at ease.
Yeah, no, I agree. I couldn't agree more. And I think my sort of practice has changed in the same way. I try not to do minimum expectations anymore in terms of like quantity of work. And it is just about quality of their effort and the work they're producing. I agree. So Dylan, I know you really want to talk about the kind of like the saying goodbye part of the end of term 6, but there's just one more thing because it's super relevant right now, particularly for year 6 teachers, is SATs and SATs results. So at the end of term 6, you get your SATs results for the school, which can be the cause of a lot of stress, a lot of pressure, just like mixed emotions. And we quite often see online in Facebook groups, some of the admins will say things like, please just bear in mind, like not everyone's going to be, don't brag basically about your SATs results. Not everyone's going to be in as good position as you. And some people are going to be feeling really rubbish about the results that they've got and they're just not going to want to see it. But it is a big thing. Our SATs results came out this week and everyone's worried. I can't pretend I wasn't worried. I'm not going to say like, yeah, no, it's just cool. It is what it is. Of course I was worried. You taught these kids for a whole year and we know that's the big thing that we have in year 6. And it was quite scary. But one thing, I did want to talk about was Sophie, as in Sophie Bartlett, who we interviewed. I hate the word interviewed. We need a better word. Interviewed.
We had a chat.
We had a chat with Sophie
her.
a few episodes ago. So go back and listen. It was a really good episode. She
number one now, by the way. Number one. It's overtaken.
Is it Dylan's obsessed with our stats. It is our number one.
I love numbers.
Number one listen to episode. So big up Sophie for that one. But she released an analysis today, which was really a really good read. She actually released it on the Learning by Questions website, which is quite cool. And yeah, anyway, so in her analysis, it was really interesting because this year, and a lot of you might remember from one of our earlier episodes where we talked about how difficult the reading paper was this year, and it caused a lot of controversy. But the pass marks for each of the papers went down quite a bit. 5 marks in reading, Dylan. So it's out of 50. So for the pass mark to drop by 5 marks, that's quite a chunk. Yeah,
what did it go from and to for everyone who's
so in 2022, the reading pass mark was 29 out of 50. And this year it's gone down by 5, so it was 24 out of 50. Not the lowest ever. The lowest ever was 21 out of 50 back in 2016.
Was that 2016? Yeah,
a bit of an anomaly.
Famously tricky one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was really interesting, and it went down in the other papers as well, all except for a +1 in the grammar, punctuation, spelling paper, which is out of 70. So going up by 1 mark is very insignificant, really. But the thing I thought was so interesting in her article, and so interesting that I wanted to share it in this, and I know you'd be fascinated as well, is in maths, Sophie has worked out that because it's a Key Stage 2 test, which means technically there is content from year 3, 4, 5, and 6 in there. It's not just a year 6 paper, which is a very common misconception. You could have passed the maths test without ever going into year 6 if you were like 100% secure on the year 3, 4, and 5 content.
Wow.
I thought that was
that's crazy.
interesting.
That is crazy. And do you know what that leads me to think straight away? Is all this pressure on year 6 teachers as if it's like their test, you know what I mean? As if it's their thing. And they play a huge role in it, don't get me wrong. But it really is a test of the entire Key Stage. And to suggest otherwise and to kind of, almost get really irate with your year 6 staff as SLT if it's not something you like seeing at the end. I think it's just ridiculous, isn't it? And it's properly toxic not to look at the macro level of, well, you know what? This is a whole school thing. And you're the leader of the whole school. So maybe a bit of introspection at that point.
Yeah, I agree. Another really just a fun fact, and I like this one because I think it leads into a conversation about the game of SATs, right? Is you also could have passed the maths papers only having ever been taught the unit on fractions, decimals, and percentages across Key Stage 2.
Goodness.
So for context of those non-teachers out there, maths is split up into like 8, 9, 10-ish strands. Things like place value, the 4 operations, so adding, subtracting. Then you've got a whole big strand on fractions, decimals, and percentages, which is arguably the biggest strand there because there's a lot of learning objectives around that. But if you had only been taught and were a master of the fractions, decimals, and percentages objectives in Key Stage 2, there were enough marks in the papers that you could have come out as expected, passing the maths papers despite having zero knowledge in any other strand of maths. And I just thought that was really interesting because my first thought on that was you could just imagine someone playing the game there being like, cool, I reckon I can teach every kid in our school all of the fractions, decimals, and percentages objectives over 4 years. We'll get 100% pass rate on the SATs. None of them will know anything else about maths, but we've played the game and we've got the best data in the county.
It really plays into that thing we talked about, doesn't it? Of is it acceptable to drop the curriculum if you think it's not worth it for the SATs? It's that thing. And yes is the answer. If this is what we're judging teachers off. If we're judging schools off this, of course it's going to happen. That staff think, ratio and proportion, that's worth like 3 marks.
One mark.
Yeah, let's do another week on fractions, decimals, percentages, because guess what? It can literally be the difference between passing or not. So until the system changes, we're always going to have these stories. And do you know what? I can't blame them just because I don't think it's true. Would I fall into that same trap in that same school with same SLT putting pressure from the top down? Probably.
Yeah.
Probably, yes.
Yeah, of course you would. Of course you would. And it's so true, isn't it? 1 mark. Question. Strands of maths to get you 1 mark. I value intrinsically as less valuable. So that's less important maths to learn. Of course it's not.
Terrible.
There is no hierarchy. Like, not really. I guess you could put like the foundations up there, like your 4 operations, just knowing how to calculate with number. But Yeah, well,
Sure.
I don't know. It's just weird, isn't it? But the SATs definitely plays on that. Even in my mind, as a maths lead who's passionate about it, it definitely impacts the way I think about what units should be taught because we get more marks in SATs. It's terrible.
I read a story online about someone who got beckoned into the office. This is a bit of a mini toxic SLT now. Got beckoned into the office this morning because of their SATs results. Okay, achieved very well in writing. Achieved very well, which they'll know of because it's all moderated and kind of done yourself. achieved very well in maths. You know, over 70%. You know, over the national average. GPS over the national average, but their reading was in the 60s.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a bit lower. So beckoned into the room. This is not acceptable. How on earth could these children come out with this in reading? It's terrible. Not one word about anything else. Not one word about anything else. Just absolutely rinsed in the morning. End of the year. Nothing left to do anyway. The results are already in. I can't get my head around these types of leaders who, instead of ever thinking, what could I have done? You know, what could I have done as the leader of this whole entire school?
Yeah.
That my cohort for the Key Stage 2 SATs over 4 years has come out significantly below average on reading. It's the year 6 teacher's fault. What are you doing, you absolute idiots? Get me there now.
It's true, though, isn't it?
So toxic.
They have been the leader of that year group for the whole 4 years, technically, because they're the head teacher or whatever. Yeah, it's such a good point.
We could stop there, Hayden, but I thought, why not make this into another extremely long podcast? So I'm having a really good chat, though. I'm really enjoying this. Hope everyone at home is as well.
I'm not.
Last thing I wanted to talk about, okay, leave. Honestly, leave. I'll do a monologue. I might as well do a monologue, honestly. Last thing I thought we could talk about is, again, I see a lot of ECTs talking about this all the time. I saw one today on Threads, by the way. You want to follow us on Threads? Please do. And it was an ECT basically saying that they got a message from a parent today saying how the parent's gutted that they're not going to be teaching their child next year. And they really hoped that it would. And they spent the afternoon in tears, you know, sad about the fact that, no, in a good way, very happy with the compliment, but just sad that they're losing their first class. And I want to talk about saying goodbye because, you know, as teachers, like we said, Hayden, we always pride ourselves, don't we, on trying to build a bond with as many children as possible, spending a lot of time with these kids. And the idea that the end of year, I don't know, but it comes around so quick. As soon as we're in term 6, I kind of was in school today saying, guys, I've got like 6 days left teaching you. And they were like, yeah. And it was crazy for me to think about how, yeah, woo! It was crazy for me to think about how quickly it's come around. And, you know, saying goodbye, it's not nice, is it? Once you've built that relationship with those children. But this ECT was basically saying, does it get easier? And although I still don't like saying goodbye to my class and I love teaching them, I think it does get easier. What's your experience with that?
Oh, big time. It definitely gets easiger. My first class still have like such a place in my heart. And for no reason, like realistically, there's no reason for it other than they were my first class.
Oh, they're listening and they're gutted now. They're gutted.
Yeah, no, I mean, they were great. They were the best class ever, as every class is when I tell them at the end of the year. But realistically, I've had lots of lovely classes over the years. Like, you know, but because it was my first class, I did develop a special bond with them because I was learning as well so much stuff. And it's different. But when you're a seasoned vet like we are now, it is. I'm less emotional at the end of the year because I'm just, and I know you're going to make this point because you're really passionate about purposefully not, you explain it. You know what I'm going to say. So talk about how you feel at the end of the year and what you actively don't do with your class, which I probably would have done in my first year.
Yeah, I think it's like we said, you know, that idea of you're starting off, you want them to like you. I really, really, really believe passionately that no matter how well or how good you feel about your class or how gutted you are about them leaving, as the teacher to not join in with that conversation as much as they are. Because it's very easy when they're saying, oh, you know, and they do say this every year. They say it to every teacher. It's not just me. It's every teacher. Like, oh, can you not come with us to year 5? Who's our teacher going to be? They're worried about, they don't know it's before transition day. Maybe you could come up with us. Yeah, I hope you're our teacher again. And it's very, you can accept that. You can say, oh yeah, no, that would be lovely, wouldn't it? But you know what? You're going to love year 5. You know, it's very different. It is very different, but you're going to meet some amazing teachers. There's going to be so many people, so lucky to be taught by all of these different teachers. And especially at the end of the year when they're maybe a little bit upset about the fact they're leaving you. And you also wish that you were going up with them maybe sometimes, depending on the class or the child, and you really do miss them. I let them know that, but I always caveat it with, how amazing it's going to be for them next year. Because what I don't want to do is kind of lead them down the path of, oh, I know, yeah, it will be worse, won't it? Which would be very easy to do if you wanted to take all the praise and feel good about yourself. Oh, yeah, but it's not going to be me, guys. So it's going to be worse, isn't it?
It'll be all right.
Exactly. Be all right. I think you very, very actively have to just step out of that and step out of your ego, if that's something that's driving you in that moment, and put the children first and really big up where they're going. And next year as well, I always do this with the kids. Maybe they'll come and see me. They're in year 5. My question is always, how good's year 5? What are you up to? What you're doing? Whereas I think at the start of my career, a number of times I'd say to them, you're missing year 4. You're missing me. You're missing being in my class.
Such a thing.
What's the point in asking that question?
No,
other than trying to trigger them in some way. Always now frame it as, what have you done this week? How what are you looking forward to now in year 5? Oh, isn't that cool? You're getting on with your teachers. Isn't that amazing?
Year 6 is like a heightened version of that, because obviously they literally leave the school, and as you can imagine, they're even more anxious and nervous about leaving. And I do find that when I'm taught year 6, the kids are a lot more like clingy to in those last couple of days of being like, oh yeah, I do wish I was staying here though. Can I stay with you? You're my favorite teacher. I want to do this and that. And they do all of those things where they're like, latching onto you. And I've done exactly the same thing as you now. I always just go ultra positive about secondary school, and I'll just say, guys, I've loved having you this year, but you are going to have such a good time next year. There's so many things that I can't provide to you in primary school that you're going to get now at secondary school. It's going to be epic. You're going to meet new people. You're going to love it. And I always do that, exactly what you said there, rather than, oh, well, I'm still here if you want to, you just if you want to come back and, you can be in my class again, that'd be funny, wouldn't it? Like making that joke. Whereas, funny enough, I will make that joke to them when I see them a year later and they're completely settled into their school. I'll be like, oh, do you want to come back and be my TA? I'll say stuff like that. But in that moment, you've just got to show them, it's hard. It's tough love, isn't it? It's tough love. You've just got to be like, off you go. Like you've got to be confident with this. You can't be thinking that I can be a crutch for you, because I'm literally not going to be here in a few weeks' time for you. So you've got to be ready.
Definitely. And as I say to the ECT, it does get easier. It really does. It doesn't mean you care any less, but it just means you know what to do and what's best for the children, for sure. Linked in with saying goodbye, I've got a bit of a story here, Hayden, and it's this. It is a really touchy subject, and I know that when we were discussing what to talk about today, because believe it or not, guys, we do actually kind of plan these podcasts. I know it sounds like ramblings of madmen, but we do actually plan these podcasts. And when I mentioned this to you, you seemed a bit, unsure whether to kind of dive into that subject, and I just want to address it right now because it's about gifts at the end of the year as teachers, and I just wanted to unpick, Hayden. Maybe you could explain why it is a bit of a touchy subject for teachers to even talk about.
I think you have to be a bit careful, because at the end of the day, gifts are gifts. And I think teachers, I don't think they mean to be, but I have seen a lot of posts over the years on Facebook and things of people judging gifts in certain ways. And I'm sort of like, should probably be careful though, because someone has spent money on that, regardless of whether you like it or not, or think it's tacky, or you think they haven't put much thought into it. They've still done the thing. Like, you probably shouldn't be slagging it off and saying, oh, well, they've only got me this, they've only got me that and that. I've got 10 of these. I don't know. So when you said it, I was thinking, oh, okay, we need to be careful though, because I don't want to actually make anyone feel like we're unappreciative, which we're not, of course.
No, not at all. And I think we've seen some people do that, but that's not at all what we're like, obviously. And I think in terms of gifts, there's kind of two things to think about: is receiving gifts, right? So receiving gifts from children is, when I was younger, again, I always go back to my EQT days now because it's changed a lot. My first few years of teaching, I absolutely was that teacher who got all my gifts at the end of the year. I would, purposefully, this seems so cringe now, line them up on the table, bottles at the back, chocolates at the front, little plushie over there, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, getting that really good Instagram pose, take a picture and post it online. And that cringes me out now. And again, lots of my friends do it. So they're listening to this podcast and
you
they're like,
cringe
they're
him
talking
out.
about me. Yeah. Oh, they're talking about me. They're talking about me. Yes, I am. But no, I get it, because it's lovely, isn't it? It is lovely. Yeah. The fact that you've got these gifts from the children who you've made this really special bond with, you're showing it online. People show, we barely post online personally, so maybe it's just that we don't kind of get anymore. But the point being, there's always going to be those children who children are never in control of buying gifts for you. Never in control of buying gifts. It's always a parent. And there's going to be different situations where some children don't get you a gift, some children do. And it's just this idea of kind of glamorizing gifts. I think as teachers, again, it's our job to not do that. We can be really thankful, accept them, but I really do struggle now, or I'm very reluctant to kind of go over the top publicly and say, oh, look at this, what this person got me is amazing. I think I'll do that directly to the child or directly to the parent. I really appreciate it, but I do cringe. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I definitely do. Yeah, I don't do it anymore. I used to do that. I used to do that because I still get Facebook memories come up from like 8 years ago, 7 years ago. It was showing me this picture of like all this beer and chocolate and stuff that I got from one year. Yeah, I just don't like it anymore. I think it's a bit strange. And like you said, I'll just speak directly to the children and parents who are willing to do that. And even in my class, like I just don't make a thing of it whatsoever. I don't make a thing of it. I don't want to make any child feel bad that they haven't got me a gift, as if that's the expectation. That is not the expectation whatsoever. And when children say, "Oh, what do you want? What can I get you?" I always just give this most simple response, which is either, "Oh, you don't have to get me anything. I'd be more than happy if you just seen you on the last day," or I'll say, "Oh, make me a nice card. I'd really like a nice card. Like write me a little message because I'll keep that, and just something sentimental that doesn't cost anything. You know, I'll say that. And then if they want to go above and beyond, then great because I'd love a gin." But you know, if they don't, I don't want to make them feel bad. Which leads me on very quickly.
Because I'd love a gin or a this or a that.
yeah. Let's send this out. But one thing I've noticed quite funny, having flitted between lower school and upper school quite a lot in my career, I've noticed a bit of a trend. Like in year 6, where the kids are a bit older, I quite often get them come up to me and be like, "Yeah, you're right, Miss Stevens. Yeah, Mum says, do you like gin or beer?" Like really just straight to the cutthroat to the point, right? And in year 4, when I've been in year 4, I've had kids come up to me and say stuff like, "Miss Stevens, I've got you this," and they're really excited. And it's a poster I made for your bedroom, and it's of me and you, and we're firefighting on Mars.
So
and it's just
cute.
like some just crazy painting of like nonsense. And it's just the difference between even just a couple of years when the kids are like, "Yeah, I got you. Mum says you want that." I was like, yeah, okay, cool.
But I'm not being ungrateful or anything. But I prefer those gifts. I prefer them. Don't get me wrong. I'm going to drink that gin or that beer, and I'm very grateful. But there's just something wholesome about you've taught me all year, and I wanted to draw you this thing because that's my thing to you, and it's just lovely. And I've actually been thinking about the gifts I've got over the years, and again, it's always very treading lightly of what being grateful or not. But I've come up with some of my favorite gifts. Okay, and the theme here though is that, always teachers get wine, beer, chocolates. These are like the unique gifts that I've got, which aren't, particularly expensive, but just my top 3 that I thought about instantly. Honorable mention, I got a t-shirt. I posted it on our Instagram, and it was a drawing that a child had done that their mum then got printed onto a t-shirt.
I remember that.
It was Mr.
awesome.
Price, and just a little message on it, and that was so lovely because it came with the picture as well, and I've still got the picture on the paper.
Yeah.
And I wear the shirt around the house. It's lovely. But here are my 3 that I put together. Number 1, a bottle of strawberry Ribena. I got a bottle of strawberry Ribena from one child, probably my first or second year of teaching, because in February of that year, he came in at break time and saw me drinking a bottle of Ribena.
Oh.
We did not mention it one more time that entire year. Just said, "Oh, you like Ribena?" I was like, "Yep." End of the year, he'd wrapped up a bottle of strawberry Ribena, which is what I was drinking, and said, "Oh, you like that?" And I was just like, "Oh my God," my insides like the fact you just off the cuff saw that once and remembered it, and then would have had to say to your parent or someone at home, "Mr. Price, he likes strawberry Ribena." I was like, "Oh my God," it was just so sweet. Number 2, a jar of pickles, a jar of pickled gherkins, because I told my class the story of why my nickname was Gherkin, and they just thought it was hilarious. I'll tell you one day on the podcast. So a child at Christmas brought in a jar of pickled gherkins wrapped up. Another child, by the way, honorable mention, got me some socks with burgers on them, and I was like, "Burgers?" I was like, "That's cool," and they were like, "Yeah, because gherkins are in burgers," and I was like, "Oh my God, it's even more cool." And the last one, and I guess the most sentimental one, I suppose, that I just loved, because it was just the thought again, was just, I was in school, it was one of the last days. Again, not making a fuss about anything, but when there's 6, 7, 8 bags on the floor next to your desk of gifts, the children notice that, right? And always that day, you'll get like a little something from a kid who just wants to give you something because they're like, "Oh, I've not got something for you. I want to give you something." This child had got the most scraggy piece of paper from like the like tray of scrap paper, scribbled on it, "Dear Mr. Price, thank you so much for teaching me, blah, 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 blah." And then had 5p in their bag. and they sellotaped 5p to the bottom.
Oh no!
So they had
That's
5p.
so cute.
They sellotaped it to the bottom, and they were like, "Here's my gift to you." And I was just like, "Oh, thank you so much." And again, not degrading the other gifts, but those kind of moments there where, you know, pure thoughtfulness from the children.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest gift that the children can give us is, you know, when they're so grateful and thoughtful, and you know, that's where it just feels nice.
It's the
doesn't it?
thought
It's just
that
lovely
counts,
idea.
as they say. But it is.
It really
My
is.
top three,
And,
whilst
yeah.
you did that, I quickly wrote some down. Top three. I got a wig last year. That's nice.
There we go.
Year before that, someone came in with shampoo, bottle of Head and Shoulders.
Oh,
for
bit
me.
of theme here.
And the same year, another child came in with a nice wooden hairbrush. So,
Oh my goodness.
as you can tell, kids are probably more sentimental for me, I guess, than you. I think they're probably
Oh, yeah.
nicer than your gifts.
Yeah.
No, but in all seriousness, I've had some really nice stuff. I still literally have a pillow on my bed that a child. Well, I say the child. I think the mum knitted it for the child, but well, not knitted it, but they just sewed on Mr. S on the front. It was a really nice pillow. I still use it on my bed. It was great. Still got a coaster from my first year of teaching that a child made me. And it was reasons why we love Mr. Stevens, and it was like 3 just silly things that happened in the year. It's just nice, isn't it? They're just little things. It's not about the sort of monetary value of them.
No.
It's just, yeah. It's
Although we do accept checks.
yes, checks are great as well. Oh dear.
I've seen a lot of people actually lately have sent letters out. I always worry doing it because I'm kind of assuming someone's going to get me a gift, so I don't like putting that out there. But I've seen people do this to good effect, and it's just, you know, if you were thinking of getting me something, please don't feel the need to do that. But if you were thinking of doing something, I'd love you to donate to this charity. And I just think that's really nice, isn't it? That's such a lovely idea. And, you know, is it something I'd do in the future? Maybe. But just this idea of, you know, as teachers, we are absolutely not expecting gifts at all.
Yeah.
And we're very grateful for them, but it's not something that we expect or think differently of anyone for not doing. And we're just very grateful for those who do.
Controversially, I don't like it, and I'd never do it. It makes me
don't?
I don't like it. It makes me feel awkward. I think it's the first thing you were about to say, which was
Yeah.
I think it ironically sets a weird expectation. And 2, I don't know what it is. I find it really hard to articulate, but it just makes me feel weird. It's like, I don't want your kids, because the ones that were maybe going to do something thoughtful, I don't want that. Just chuck some money in the charity instead, and I don't have to have any of your tat. I get this weirder feeling that that's like a message that comes across. Maybe I'm thinking too much into it, because obviously giving money to charity is nice, but it makes me feel a bit strange. So I usually just avoid that, even though I'll big up someone else for doing it.
No, I get that. I mean, I completely agree, because that's the awkwardness I feel. Just like, putting it out there that I know you're thinking of getting me something. It's like, oh God, no.
Might not have been.
You know.
Yeah. And I was going to get you some nice little thing. Now I've got to chuck a tenner in a charity thing.
Yeah.
My kid was actually going to do this little picture for you. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
I suppose they can do both.
I get it.
They could do either, can't they?
Sorry, we get it, Hayden. You hate charity. That's fine.
If the charity is not me, I'm not interested. And with that, I think, what a terror. Please don't clip that out of the podcast and put that on there. If the charity is not me, not interested.
Oh, guess who's in charge of the clips? Oh.
Do you remember when we started this episode and we were like, it's going to be a shorter one today? That's nice, isn't it? We've planned a bit of a shorter one. Long.
Yeah.
Long. Sorry,
Long.
guys.
Long.
Hope you enjoyed it, though.
Bye.